Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully and welcome to the latest RAF Inside Air podcast. In this episode, we'll get an update from the Assistant Chief of Staff for Career Management, Air Commodore Nick Britton.
And the old lines we had then about career management by dartboard, or how do you know when your desk officer's lying to you, their lips are moving, all those stories that we used to go through, I fear are not true for today, even before we come to CM Nexus. And when I speak to DCOM Cap, he's changed those three things that the chief has, and he just says, my number one priority is retention, my number two priority is retention, and my number three priority is retention. That's how important this is. 15% of the individual augmentees out there today delivering the RAF's output are reservists. And we don't have a career management process for them at all.
As usual, we'll also reheat a few stories which you might have had slip under your radar, but first, let's see if you can identify what this noise is. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Air Commodore Nick Britton is the Assistant Chief of Staff for Career Management for the RAF. He's been in post since the end of July last year and is overseeing the rollout of the soon-to-be phone-based system to help with Career Management Nexus. With the RAF retention exit rate at levels not seen since the early 1990s, it's part of a package to make a career with the Royal Air Force more transparent and fair, as he told Squadron Leader Peter Lisney.
Air Commodore Nick Britton, it's really good to see you again. Thanks for being on Inside Air.
Peter, that's very kind of you. It's a pleasure to come back on your show. And I'm very pleased that today you've come to visit me face to face. I enjoyed the last one being done online, like everything is nowadays. But it's fascinating to see you back here, to be here in the heart of career management, in our promotion boardroom, with all your technology to talk about our next change program. Thank you for having me back.
That's great. So, what was really significant last year when we recorded the episode on trades and branches out, professions in, episode 42, it released in early July. That went on to be the most downloaded episode of the year. Who would believe?
Well, we are doing about people. People are interesting per se. And do I therefore get a gold iPod or something I can put on my wall if I was number one?
I'm going to have to think about that.
What will I get this time?
Okay, but yeah, it does just demonstrate how important these subjects are to our people, and I hope for those outside of the Royal Air Force or former serving who are listening today will perhaps take comfort in the progress that's being made. And if you are listening and you're not in the Royal Air Force but you're involved in industry, I hope there's some lessons to be picked up from this discussion.
Thank you. And Programme Professions has gone from strength to strength. You may recall last time we spoke about being in the early stages of this programme and how we'd got our first 5 professions over the line. They graduated because their change was not significant. There was no change to employment expectation. But I can reassure you we've moved on from there. And the next profession to graduate just last week on the 1st of June was the intelligence profession. That is one of those complex professions where there's more than one trade group in the old speak involved. So the next one to go after that is air and space operations, and the programme carries on its journey. You may remember I said beforehand it's 5 years journey to get to the end of this programme, but we are carrying on that journey all steam ahead.
And it's gathered momentum, and I hear it when I go around to stations, people talking about this. So that's really good. Now, we're here today to talk about Career Management Nexus. If there's anyone in the Air Force that hasn't complained about how their career has been managed, that would be interesting to speak to them. Now, you and I both joined the Royal Air Force roughly the same time in the early 90s. Can you tell me about your experiences of what you personally experienced and saw around you of career management?
Ooh, that is a tempting option, isn't it, to go and expose what it felt like back then. But remember, it was a very different service back then. We were 90,000 strong. We had that Cold War threat still there. We knew what we were going to try and do. The enemy was clear and present. And how we used our people back then was from the earlier days in itself. Technology wasn't our friend. And the old lines we had then about career management by dartboard Or how do you know when your desk officer's lying to you, their lips are moving? All those stories that we used to go through, I fear are not true for today, even before we come to CM Nexus. What I've learnt in the year I have been ACOS CM, the one star in charge of career management, is those stories are not true. Some of those perceptions linger on, but the stories are no longer true about how we do career management. That said, there are some issues about how we do career management, which we're going to come on to. But I find when I brief this that it's about, we said another change program. And every time I go and stand up and brief, and I've just come back from Aviator last week, actually. RAF Career was fantastic, had a great time there. But when I brief and the next change program, I find the room gets that little bit, they all sit back in their chairs a little bit. The whole thing, the shutters come down a little bit.
Yeah, here we go again.
Here we go again. Yet another change program. And I think there is a change fatigue going through the organisation. I, though, reassure them when I brief that I'm not the driver of this change. It's not some idealist back here at High Wycombe with a master plan that's causing this change for career management. Instead, I remind the service population, you are the drivers for this change. Because you have said in the AFCAT survey, the Armed Forces Continuous Attitude Surveys that we produce every year, we have traditionally been extremely poorly perceived in career management. The lowest of the three services. Our service personnel are not content with career management.
So how has it been described? If we dare.
Yeah, I think we can, sitting as we are in the promotion board room, but they talk about a number of things. And I found this out because the AFCAS survey data is good, because it's reliable, it's longitudinal, it goes back over years, you can graph it, it's done by the professionals, so it's a very strong product. But it hasn't got the detail you might want. So I started with the AFCAS data being there's an issue with how CM is perceived, and then I did my own survey. And I got some 4,500 responses back from RAF serving personnel. What's wrong with CM? What do you want to see more of? What do you not like seeing? And that, in essence, is the basis of the main driver of the CM Nexus program. Give them what they want. And I don't want to go through the same list, but because I know you've got the Chief of the Air Staff already briefing on this CM Nexus program. But if I may summarise it, it starts with efficiency and communications. The communications that come from CM were not strong enough. They weren't clear enough. They weren't easy to get hold of. They weren't shared well. And the processes, the CM efficiency, our processes were from the 1970s. We were still running the same things that the old chief, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wixton, he would have recognised from his time as a wing commander, career manager. And when I was talking to him about this CM Nexus, before we got the OK at the EXCO, the Executive Committee of the Royal Air Force, he was telling me then that he could come back in to the career management floor plate today and pick up where he had left it some 20 years beforehand, because the processes were not modernising. So, if I could, I know I've got 6 real buckets of things or themes of what my change I'm going to do, but the key ones I'd like your audience to hear is efficiency of process and communication. Telling people what's going on. Okay,
that's interesting, and particularly just to pick up from an interview we conducted with the outgoing chief. He did reflect on communication. That there's always room to communicate more.
Well, yes, there's room to communicate more, but it needs to be more sophisticated communications as well. It's not good enough just pumping information out there. It's got to be attractive. One of the things that's landed really well on this, we've called the Promotion Board Statistics, so PBS. What happened at the Promotion Board? And I have lots of data about how many people, whether it be, let's do corporal to sergeant, TG1 Aviator, how many people were in that sphere, how many people are in the field from promotion, how many of them have got enough seniority, how many have done this, how many have done all the other little criteria that get you to the promotion board. We had all that going back 10 years. But we didn't have it in an attractive format. So my staff went across to see media and communications. And we said, how would we present this in such a way that an enlisted aviator or officer with a spare 5 minutes in a crew room somewhere could look at this and say, oh, that's visually engaging. What's it trying to tell me? What's going on? And then they'll get the information to manage their expectations, to understand what's going on in prom boards. But it's not good enough just publishing data. It must be visually attractive. It must be informative. It must be usable.
And the communication, communication should be two-way. How much of the voice of the aviator is involved in career management going forward?
So, if career management has a flaw currently, do you remember how I started by saying when we joined up, career management had some flaws? In the last few years, career management has done an amazing journey in moving away from the career management you and I experienced when it's called Manning. Do you remember back then in the old days?
I remember asking to be, at the end of my first career as a regular officer, was it 96, something like that, I requested to be in facilities management. So I was a scribbly like yourself, admin, in the south of England, because that's where we wanted to live. And I specifically said, I don't want to be OC General Duties flight because I couldn't see a crossover into Civi world. What happened? I was posted as OC General Duties flight in the Midlands.
Well, if you remember back then, if you can't take a joke, why did you join? That's what we actually said to ourselves. But fortunately, our world has moved on dramatically from that. So our engagement with our service populations is getting better. But when I describe this, when I'm out on the road, I sometimes use this analogy. The officers are getting strong engagement, but there's less rigour in their process. Whereas currently the other ranks get rigour in their assignment process, but less engagement. And we promised them, years ago now, enhanced for the other ranks, enhanced career management, ECM we call it, where they would get more engagement. But because of those processes I spoke of, going back to the 1970s, our extremely hard-working desk officers and career managers just didn't have the capacity to manage the engagement. They were just managing the process. The system, the admin, was too old-fashioned to give them the spare capacity. We even have a line in our strategy about the digitalisation of CM, that the actual process of assigning people should not be an administrative burden. That's not the thing we should be worrying about. It's where they want to go, how we engage with them. The admin should be easy, but currently the admin is not easy. We believe it takes up to 37 minutes to raise a single assignment order. Now we're doing up to 10,000 a year. All that time is being spent running the process, not engaging with our people. So that communications you speak of, I think is vital, is two ways. But then my corporals and sergeants who are running 1,000 people on their desk need to have the capacity to get after that. Which is why when I get this thing to work, and I will come on to how I'm convinced it's going to work shortly if you'll let me, recognising it's your interview, not mine, and you're asking the questions. But that capacity, I don't want to therefore have a cost saving and get rid of desk officers and make it cheaper. I want instead to reinvest their time in engaging with service personnel to enable the
That's an interesting point. I'm just going to pick up on that. What I'm hearing is that this is not being driven by cost. It's being driven by experience of our people.
It is being driven not by cost, absolutely. It is being driven by the AFCAS and the data. But I will go slightly further, recognising that we've all landed the point we're not here to save money. I'm not here to take people off career management. I'm here to make it better. But there are other things I'm doing. Your listeners may remember in that extremely successful podcast you speak about, the number one of 2020.
Yes,
In that one, I spoke about career management by competence, that the professions journey, by moving away from trade groups, we could no longer look at our service personnel under the homogeneous label that they're all the same. So you spoke about admin earlier, which we used to call trade group 17, or TG1 I spoke about for engineering, on aircraft engineering. And we assumed they're all the same, and that's how we did their career management. But under this future of program professions, it won't be like that. We'll be looking at the individual competencies that they have. Accordingly, CM, career management, must build systems, of which this is delivering, that enable that career management by competence. And then equally as important to me, when I found out that the reserves, which are so vital to the delivery of output for the Royal Air Force, the quotation, the stat I like to quote every now and then, is 15% of the individual augmentees out there today delivering the RAF's output are reservists. And we don't have a career management process for them at all. You know, we were speaking earlier about your wife and taking a job in the reserves and how that works and how, that needs to be sorted out. And I'm really pleased that we mobilised 2 reservists in order to work out what sort of career management should reserves be given.
Crumbs, okay.
And how should it be delivered, and what's the technology for that. And before you go any further, there's one other thing I think I have to do, beyond just that satisfying the AFCAS need, that perception for a modernised, digitalised CM, career management. I also need to worry about talent. We tell ourselves people are our greatest assets. And we have some fantastic processes that my team are delivering under RAF Lead. It's one of the ones who work for the leadership and talent markers, about how we'll try and take the creme de la creme, the best, perhaps 200 a year, of our enlisted aviators, and give them enhancements about how they will manage their career. Give them pointers, give them experiences that can help them develop their careers. And we need to make sure we are always focused on that talent, doing the best for our people. So those are the three extra things, as well as the perception of our people, that CM Nexus is going to address.
In Civvy Street, someone may think of their career management as entirely managed by themselves, because they will be in a role, perhaps, and then they will identify other opportunities either within that company or outside in another organisation. They will write their CV, they will apply for the job, they will sit an interview, and they may or may not be successful. But they are in control of their career management. Can you tell me, what is the Air Force way of doing things? So
in our future, it's going to deliver what we have said we were going to deliver in the past. You may remember the Career Management Charter that sought to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the command chain and the needs of the service writ large. And when you describe that life outside, that's a similar sort of thing going through via the HR processes. Yes, the individual is looking for a job, but the job within a Civvy Street company needs to be managed to balance the needs of the company as well and the needs of the local command chain. And we are going to try and do the same thing. But we are a service. The service need will always come first. If the chief was in the room now, our new chief, he'll be telling you about the operational ethos. Remember what we actually are, our culture. We are here to deliver deadly force. We have given the tremendous responsibility by the government of being the weapon of choice if we need to deploy lethal force. We, our personnel, regular and reserve, civil service contractor, should be awed by that. However, it's also the 21st century. I do need a system by which our service personnel, regular and reserve, can look for jobs, roles within the organisation. CM Nexus is going to deliver that. They'll be able to see every possible role that's coming up in the future in the Air Force for their rank, for their competencies, even for the rank above. So they can start looking, preparing for what they could do at the rank above. They'll be able to see when those roles, those positions are becoming available. They'll be able to apply on their phone. No more having to go into Gen offices and do things on a Gen app. If they're going back all the way back to our youth, I want this technology, SKIO is a key name here, this technology to be in their crew rooms, at home. They should just be looking on their iPad, looking on their phone. This job looks interesting. They should be able to click on the job and see the job description. What actually is this job doing? Then if they like the look of that, they should be able to express an interest on their phone. I'm sorry to keep repeating those, right? You can cut them out later if you want. On their phone, which goes straight back to the assignment officer, the desk officer, to do on the assignment selection tool, which can then choose who gets that role, balancing off what the individual wants, what the service needs, what the local chain of command may require. So that balancing will still be the role of the career manager, still be done by a person, but all the system behind it will have been modernised to more reflect the journey you spoke of that happens in the rest of the world. Yes, I know we're an armed force. Yes, I know we've got service need. And yes, I make the point about our operational ethos. But at the same time, the best of a modernised career management process that the external world enjoys, we should be able to use that technology ourselves.
So just rather than relying on the network and speaking to friends, former colleagues at different units, aviators will be able to go onto their phones and look at the jobs that they might be eligible for now, plus at the next rank up, what competencies will be required so that they can work towards those and have a bit of a plan over a few years. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm getting after. And I even my staff don't like me promising things that we're not sure we can deliver. But I'm now going out there and briefing that by the end of the summer, I'm going to be very clear on this. I mean, not the meteorological summer, but the geological summer. I mean, by the equinox, we will have this tool on their phones, on their iPads, so they can see. Now, it'll be version 1. Version 2 might be better, version 3 might be better still. But I want it up and running. Now, I said at the very beginning about our change fatigue and how people have had enough of change programs that weren't ready. And some of your audience may be concerned that And will I have a working tool, or would it be another thing that doesn't quite deliver on what it's supposed to do? And when I breathe this out on the stations, I remind them, this is new to us. This SCIO thing is new for the Royal Air Force. But our colleagues in our sister service, the Royal Navy, have been using this successfully for 4 years. We are behind the drag curve now. So I am convinced we can get this running on our phones via the My RAF series, because the Royal Navy have been doing that successfully for years.
And at the other end of the phone,
so once
the career manager is...
The career manager gets, when they come to assign that post, using something called the assignment selection tool, they will see everyone who's put an expression of interest in against that one. No more relying on someone remembering an email or phoning someone up and at the right time. It'll happen because the machine will record every expression of interest given by an aviator on their phone. So come assignment moment, that is when the art of career management comes in. That's when the personal thing comes in. The relationship between what the service needs now and in the future, what the individual wants now and in their future, and what the chain of command is trying to do at the local station level now. Because, of course, we don't just want to assign people who have the perfect competency match for that job. We want to assign people who can grow into that job and acquire new competencies. Otherwise, of course, it's a diminishing return. There'll be less and less people. So we need to recognise that there's a base level of competence required for this job, and by doing that job, they'll acquire these further competencies, making further jobs open to them. Because that service need is long term. Let's make it as an officer example. I wish to grow ACOS A3, ACOS A5, or J3, J5 at PGHQ.
Just in English.
Okay. I thought that was in English, but I think you mean in abbreviation. So I need to grow 1 stars in our officer community who can operate in the operations, the 3 space, or the plan set space, the 5 space, and I want to make them competitive tri-service. I need to grow officers to do that via the service and what the service needs in the longer term. So I will wish to be saying to certain officers, have you considered this role rather than that one? Because this role will give you the competencies to make you more competitive for this 1-star role in 15 years' time. And our role in career management is to help people see why a certain job may be more advantageous for them, even if it's in the wrong location or they don't really want to go there or they hadn't really thought about it. But we in career management can explain what that role is going to give them, what it's going to open up in potentials in the future.
Does that mean the career manager is going to be more of a consultant than...
Well, I think it means the career manager is going to be a career manager. You know, if there is any criticism that can be laid against my staff at the moment, perhaps it's more that they're gap managers. They're just trying to satisfy the service need in the short term by just getting people to go to locations. Gap managing. In their future, they will have that capacity. They'll have the information to say a compelling candidate or warrant officer, a compelling warrant officer, compelling flight sergeant will have had these experiences that make them compelling. And a compelling 1-star would have had these work experiences as we properly career manage.
What will be the consequence for the aviators that ignore the systems? SCIO, beg your pardon.
SCIO. It comes from the Latin scire, to know, but we call it SCIO. So if you weren't to engage with CM, I would question why you didn't want to engage with CM. Because after all, it is the career management process that will determine where you're going to be, determines your chance of having a fulfilling career or not. And I recognise there may be some hard outliers that will take us more effort to get to, but that's what enhanced career management was always supposed to get after. How do we get people to engage in their career? How can we contact them? The beautiful thing about SCIO is it does open up technological solutions. So if they're not engaging, we can automatically email them. We can just do stuff to ping them, to have their interest raised in us. But yes, if they don't wish to engage at all in the process, then I'm afraid they would not benefit from experience. They would have the old-fashioned way of career management by at their fad, we'd just assign them. That's not, I think anyone wants that. So I would struggle to imagine any young aviator, even middle-aged aviators like us, any young aviator being in that position. In fact, our suggestion is it's the other way around. They want to know more and more and more what's going on. And I think the AFCAS data suggests that as well. And definitely our survey of the 4,500 people told us they want to see the data. They want this to be transparent. They want to know what is going on. So this expression of interest I spoke of will be the real data of JPA, our Joint Personal Administration System. Not some offline spreadsheet from the 1990s. Instead, the real data with the real forecast availability dates. When does that role become available? With that real stuff played, and allow individuals to engage and have a little bit more empowerment than they currently have.
And hopefully not relying, or the situation perception that it's who you know, not what you know.
Because it's going to be transparent. You can see. Even on the expression of interest tool, you'll be able to look and see that this role at RAF Coningsby has 200 expressions of interest. I'm just making these numbers up. 200 expressions of interest. So you can manage your expectations of you being the 1 in 200 who gets that job. Whereas another role at another RAF station has no expressions of interest. So then if you put your name in for that one, then you're clearly much more likely to get it. Similarly, if I make it not about the individual but about the service, it'll be very powerful for me to be able to explain to a station commander you're having no expressions of interest in roles on your station. What's going on? Is it something about your activities? Is it about something how you're running the business? Is it something as simple as the infrastructure? Is it something that you don't have wraparound childcare and everyone else does? Is it that
so when there are gaps going forward, who's going to get posted there?
Well, so we currently seek to manage the pain by saying we'll post across the business to the profession workforce level. So if a profession is staffed up to 90%, then we try and manage that 90% across the piece. What this technology will allow us to do is give more empowerment to individuals. If they wish to serve at Coningsby, and we have slots at Coningsby, vice serving at RAF Odium, then I have a choice ahead of me. I can allow them to go to where they wish to serve, or I can try and persuade them to go where they didn't. In the old days, the service need posting. Do you remember how we spoke at the beginning of this chat about how it was when we were young? Then the service really didn't care about the needs of the individual at all. It was you are to go to, in my case, Saxe Ord. So I asked to go south, so they sent me to Lucas. I said, I come from London, can I go south? They sent me to the Falklands. I said, can I go a bit further north? So they sent me back to Lucas. That was that was the world we enjoyed. But I am minded that our modern generation of aviators are less prepared to live like that.
Oh, they'll walk.
Well, I was going to remark, our retention, how many leave the service, our retention exit rate is up to 10%. It hasn't been that high since you joined the service back in 91. So right now, we are not delivering to our enlisted aviator.
What does that 10% actually mean?
So that's the mixture of the PVR, stands for premature voluntary release, and the outflow from coming at the end of an engagement or retiring at the end of a service career, to give you something called the total outflow of service, 10% right now, highest it's been forever. Our inflow is constrained by the number of gaps we have, the number of spaces we have in our training schools, whether that be, and you're going to say Swinderby, and I'm going to say we lost Swinderby years ago, whether that be at RAF Halton Ware BRTC, Basic Recruit Training Centre, or whether it be at Cranwell, or at the Phase 2 schools, if they're going engineering, it's costly. There's only so many we can push through. So right now, we have a retention challenge ahead of us, which is unfortunate.
Small front door, big back door.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Or if you like, exit wound, entry wound. But that's carrying on at the same time that the chief would talk to you about the operational ethos. Now, it's pleasing when the chief talks, because he goes after operational ethos, he says people. And he talks about this story about we struggle to have a larger front door, which we need to square away, and we can't retain enough. We can't maintain this exit rate. If this carries on, we haven't got enough people. At the same time, there's a war in Europe. Now, this is not the time to be going through a retention crisis. And then he goes on to, pleasingly, not equipment, he goes on to infrastructure. He points out that half our buildings are over 50 years old. We can't have people in buildings without any heating in the winter. And when I speak to DCOM Cap, he's changed those three things that the chief has, and he just says, my number one priority is retention. My number two priority is retention. And my number three priority is retention. That's how important this is. So, if we're going to live that, experience, the chief and DCOM Cap, now of course known as DCAS, if they want to deliver on that choice about will career management allow them to go to Coningsby if they want to go to Coningsby, even if it means somewhere else is less filled, is a choice ahead of me that this tool will enable. So I'll have that information of what they want, it'll all be recorded, it's all on the machine, and it can be actioned on that machine.
Let's hear a few words from Air Chief Marshal Knighton.
What the project aims to achieve, based on your feedback within AFCAS and pulse surveys, is to firstly improve understanding of how the promotion system operates. Secondly, improve the quality of appraisals. Third, improve efficiency within the career management team through digitisation. And finally, increase personal and professional development opportunities.
We've heard what the Chief wants to see here, or is promising, and how is that going to be delivered in practical terms?
So, as we learned from the programme professions, to deliver any change needs a programmatic approach. We can't just have a little go at this. It's got to be constructed around the mandate, around the programme artefacts, around a plan for what we're going to deliver. And also, though, I would like to reassure your readers, we have already started this journey. We actually started this over a year ago, in fact, slightly more than a year ago. So when the Chief talked about appraisal system, we've already changed the OJAR SJAR training system. So my own team have written the new OJAR SJAR training that some 7,500 people have been through, designed not just to be a one-off session in a room on a hot sunny afternoon, instead to be an online experience where both the report writer and the report subject have their areas of the training that they can go back into, dip back into if you like, refresh themselves upon as they go through their journey. And that is how we're going to get after the OJAR SJAR efficacy, if I may use a difficult word, the effectiveness of the OJAR and SJAR. Training people what to expect as a subject, training people about what career management expect to see if you're the reporting officer. What have they done? The impact of what they've done. How did they do it? These are the fundamental questions that need to be answered in the OJAR and SJAR process to try and improve the OJAR and SJARs that were received at the promotion boards. If I was also going slightly further about this, I spoke earlier about the themes or the buckets in programmatic space, because I've taken what the Chief has said, analysed it back in with those 4,500 responses to the survey, then come up with 6 areas that we're going to mention. I started by talking about communications and efficiency. Clearly they link directly to what the Chief has said. I go on to fairness, a fair system. I go on to transparency. I go on to consistency. And I go on to talent. Each of those 6 areas I've given a project lead to within my organisation. We then have deliverables against that which I am maintaining. And I wasn't going to go into the whole detail because, of course, if any of our audience within the service, regular or reserve, wishes to know more, it's on our CM SharePoint site under CM Nexus. And there they can find more information on these things.
So it can be found. And you've been delivering numerous roadshows. I believe you were recently in Cyprus, so you're getting around the globe. Hopefully our listeners in distant parts of the globe are listening to this as well to get the information. On these roadshows, what questions have you been asked that you really didn't like?
The one I find most depressing for this service is, will it work? So I gave your audience that line that it's new to us, but not new. The Royal Navy have used this technology, this SKIO thing, to enable all this I speak of for the last 4 years. But it just shows how, some of our previous change programs have been pretty toxic in what it's done to our organisation, what their faith in us, whether as the leadership, I'm not quite the SLT, the senior leadership team, that's a 2-star community above, but there is a degree of a lack of faith that these change programs can actually deliver. And that's so depressing, because when things aren't right, when the things aren't working well enough, we have to change, don't we, to make them right. But if we have an organisation that's now not quite apathetic, but maybe even resistant to change, that's not helpful. The Chief speaks of his operational culture, and that I agree with him. Organisational culture is how I describe it, but there's something a bit wrong with our culture if our body of the Kirk, the enlisted aviators, are looking at us with a degree of, I don't believe you. That is the thing I find most depressing. So I want to make sure this works when it comes out. I want to make sure that they can see the benefits. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. That promotion board statistics I spoke of earlier, a simple graphic, that has gone down extremely well. As an example of how simple changes can reassure our populations that we are doing the right thing, that we have got their interests at heart, that we are trying to make this a better service. That, I think, is a powerful message of what CM Nexus gives us. But that resistance to change, that sense of, oh no, not again, that is the most depressing thing I get on the roadshow.
So you're looking for trust, hope, bit of faith?
Well, yes. It's about telling them, if I weren't doing this, what would the alternative be? A non-transparent system, an unfair system, an inconsistent system, an inefficient system. Surely nobody wants that for their career management. You spoke earlier about how an external company has modern ways of doing things. Why should not service personnel who are prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, why should they not have modern ways of doing things? So I am convinced I'm doing the right thing. I recognise I need to be as effective as possible in communicating this change and why I'm doing it, to bring our service personnel with us. We can't leave them in the back somewhere. So I didn't like your question, if I may. I didn't like your question about what would happen to the recalcitrant aviator who doesn't want to engage in the system, because that would mean I've failed.
So in a few months' time, aviators will see this, they will be able to go on Skio, they will be able to access this on their phone, they will know whether you've delivered on the front end. What about the outcome, the output, the back end?
Yeah. So if I get the front end right, and I will get it right because I'm just taking the Navy's technology, by the summer equinox, by the autumn equinox, this will be out on their phones and they'll be able to see straight away that it works. They will see every role being advertised. They will see that they can apply for these roles. When the FAD is, when it's coming up, what they can do, they can see their 5 expressions of interest being put in. And then very shortly after that, they'll see the first result as they get the first assignment orders against their expressions of interest. Some will get the ones they want, some won't get the ones they want, but they'll be explained why they didn't get the posting they wanted. Obviously, only one can take the posting, clearly. So there'll be some who get what they desire and some who might have to have something else. So that'll happen very quickly. But
so will that mean by the late autumn, winter?
Yeah, when those first selections for those roles are being taken place using our assignment selection tool, then we'll be exposing, and the assignments come out, that'll be happening by the autumn.
So one turn of the handle.
Yeah, straight away.
Yeah.
But I want to change the dial of perception. So I spoke about the AFCAS survey, which does not make good reading on the latest one. AFCAS 23, if you read it, is not a good place. Hence, I can see the Chief's call for this operational ethos, this cultural change as we look to our future. I want to make AFCAS 24 data better for us, when more and more service personnel have seen the benefit. And let's talk about the philosophy behind this. I don't just want to have this tool ease the administration of our current process. I want to be more individualistic. Just like I spoke on program professions, we no longer view our aviators as homogeneous types of the whole. Instead, we view them as individuals with individual aspirations, with individual skills and competences. Why can't I allow individuals to tell me more about things like the FAD? So the forecast availability date, when we say someone else to have a go at that role, is usually for our enlisted aviators 5 years, for our officers 3. But why? What if someone wants to jump more quickly? This tool will enable people to jump more quickly. I, when I was young, loved jumping around the RAF quickly. I loved the fact I did 18 months here, 6 months in the Falklands, 6 months in the Balkans, 12 months in Sierra Leone. I loved all that movement. But as I get older, I don't really want it so much now. I want, if the Chief is listening, I want him to let me deliver on this. I want to stay and make sure Skio works, make sure CM Nexus works, make sure program professions work. So I'm looking for stability now. So I've changed what I wanted. Why can't I have a more flexible career management that recognises what I want? So indeed, if an aviator took a job for a 5-year FAD but loved it so much that they wanted to go for a longer posting, a longer FAD, and the command chain is content, the individual is content, why are we not allowing that? Why not have more individualistic approaches now that the system enables it? It's part of this culture, isn't it? That we're about the person, the individual, offering them more individualistic career management.
Does that mean that if someone is 2 or 3 years into a post and they are tired and ready to move to another place, that they can flag that they're ready to move?
Of course we have that technology. So now every posting is on offer, as I said. Every posting is advertised. And if I were to go down this line, and I think I will, I'd have probably a limit. After, you've got to do 2 years or something. After that, you can start to look. Or you could start to ask to stay longer, because it can all be done now individually tailored, because the machine is managing all this data. We're not relying on desk officers to remember that aviator wants to go at the 2-year point, whereas this one wants to go at the 5-year point. This system we have of everyone having the same is lovely, but why? If someone wants to move earlier, why not let them? If someone wants to stay longer, why not let them? If they and the service need and the chain of command are content with that decision.
Gone are the days of if the face fits.
Yes. I think you've been scarred by your career management. If you need to speak to me later about your career management experiences that you went through, but those days were suitable for that time, weren't they? Those days are not suitable for this time. I have mentioned our total outflow rate. I've mentioned that our inflow does not match our outflow. I've mentioned that now is the time for more radical solutions about how we give our service personnel the service career they want to, as they undertake this awesome responsibility of delivering lethal force on behalf of His Majesty's Government.
How will this work for those aviators who wish to have that zigzag career that I know the senior leadership team aspire to create that or facilitate that ability? How will that work? For someone to leave a technical job and go and do 5 years in industry and then want to come back?
Yes. So we are talking of the managed pathways here. We already have, one of my team is working out a lovely or reinvigorated managed pathway for aviators who fly. So our pilots, our aircrew, so they can go and experience something else outside and then come back. Both managing how they go, at what stage they finish their time with us, and managing if they wish to have, if you like, some sort of career intermission. And why can't that be offered in more spaces? So the next one we're looking at is engineering. What could you do in the engineering space for the enlisted aviator who's of an engineering trade? What could we do to enable that sort of management of a pathway as well? Because zigzagging is, I think, perhaps our future. People become tired of a service life that asks so much of them and of their families, and they need a respite, if you like. When we were young in our service, we had respite tours where you could go and still serve in the RAF on some little RAF station somewhere where not a lot happened. And then you went back to the front line in Bruggen or
it was support command or strike command,
correct.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. So we were big enough to have that. We've contractualized out so many of those roles now that they don't exist. But why are there not mechanisms to facilitate those who wish to go? Indeed, I have just re-recruited in VER term, which is a type of volunteer ex-regular reserve, so a reservist, but who's done ex-regular time, who had left us after, no name so packed job, but I think he'd done 40 years as regular, then reservist, and then he said, right, that's it, I've had enough. And 12 months later, I brought him back in to help me deliver on this CM Nexus, because he had had his respite, and then we brought him back in, and he's very happily serving on the VER terms of 90 days a year. And that's, I think, our future. We need to find mechanisms of allowing that flexibility. And finally, if I may ram the point home, my career management, my competency, will, I hope, facilitate that. The best possible competency framework for me is one that's externally facing, that's looking in the external industry, so that it makes it easier for people to leave and get a job in the external life, and similarly it makes it easier for us to recognise what they've got in civilian life and bring them back in, to enable the zigzag you speak of.
To what extent does CM Nexus apply to our reservist cadre?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that there was no CM process for our reservists, despite the importance of reservists for the delivery of the Royal Air Force's outputs. We had the SERV website, you may have seen that, where jobs are advertised, but that's not quite the same as career management. So I've mobilised 2 reservists to work out what we could do. What should it look like? Clearly, the career management of the regulars does not need to apply to reservists. It's a different organisation, it's got different needs.
Yeah, you join one squadron and you could be there for 30 years.
Yeah, so what are we offering them? But seeing as we're trying to grow careers within the reserves, where they could join at this rank level and progress through a career of rank levels, how do we enable that, rather than just relying on them seeing a website advertisement on SERV? There needs to be something, but quite what it should be. And I know that the use of the My RAF on the app for the bring on your own telephone is really powerful for what I can do with regulars. And I know the Royal Navy has a My RN Reserves app on their phone. So we're looking at that. And I know that I could, with a little bit more money, that's not expensive, enable that for our reserve community, and I could therefore get after what precisely they want. I've given myself a little bit more time. I spoke earlier that by 1 September 24 I want to have done the regular part of this, but I only mobilised the reserves last week to start the CM reservist part out, CM Nexus reserves part out, and I want to make sure they do roadshows. I want them to go out with focus groups to understand what my reserve community wants, what would be success for them. So it will take me a little longer, but I'm already on that journey. Our
Commandant General was recruited from the Army to fill a 2-star role because we hadn't been in that vein of nurturing people up to 2-star level. Will CM Nexus support that and give that vision? Yeah, it will be an enabling tool. But what we really wanted was a vision in the first place. I think we now have that vision. So when I speak to the Commandant General, or I speak to my own DACOS Reserves Group Captain Peart, who looks after reserves systems for me, there is that vision already that we're growing the reserves. And I may have mentioned to you earlier, 15% of my IAs are already reservists. We cannot deliver the RAF's output without the reserves. So we need to make sure we have a system that can maintain a reserves career management at the appropriate level for those who wish to stay where they are or those who wish to climb the promotion ladder and do other more challenging roles in their service career. And I don't think the website, strong though the Serve website is enough to enable the light touch of career management that I think our reserve community deserves. What does CM Nexus mean for those RAF personnel who are serving with the Army, Royal Navy or overseas nations? So we have some 7,500 service personnel serving in what we call the diaspora, those who are serving away from RAF top-level budget in other aspects that we want to do. Those posts need to be described under the same SCIO system so that they can find those posts and find a way into them and find a way out of them. What this does also require, of course, is every post to be correctly identified, correctly described. What does this job do? So that when they go to apply for it on their phone, it will come up with the current job spec, the job specification, that describes that job, describes the competencies required for that job, the competencies acquired for that job. For RAF-owned jobs, that'll be easier for me to manage. For the ones out in the diaspora, I will be fighting harder to make sure that PGHQ or the Army or the Navy or the Marines are maintaining their job specs in the way that we anticipate. But I'm not alone in this journey. The Royal Navy is already on this. The British Army were telling me just a month ago they wish to get after career management by competence. We are part of a vanguard, if you like, of a change process that's recognising as our armed forces get smaller and the threat level gets greater, we need to be more agile and flexible. We need to be able to manage their expectations better. We can't allow them still to have a 1970s career management process that goes by in the Army space cap badge. It's got to be done about what they can do, career managed by competence, whether that be in the RAF TLB or whether that be in posts owned by the Army, the Navy, Stratcom, PGHQ, etc. Do you think you'll ever integrate a review system so that incumbents of a post can review the post and rate it? Do I think I will, we have. So we recognise straight away that these job specs, if they're out of date or the competencies are out of date, doesn't help anyone because those looking for jobs won't understand what it actually is. Then the command chain, back to my career management charter, balancing the needs of the service, the needs of the individual, the needs of the local chain of command. The chain of command won't be getting the volunteers for those posts because they aren't describing the post correctly. So we have a simple change system for the EVF. If you remember the EVF, the Establishment Variation Form. Instead of going through a Byzantine change process that required about 12 weeks of effort, we've gone to a simple change process where it can simply change both the job spec and the competencies without having to have 1,000 people sign it off, so that they can change. This way, rather than me desperately trying to change all the EVFs, try and keep all the job specs up to date all the time, I'm arguing I have 30,000 colleagues helping me do that. Every service person going around and saying, this isn't the job I signed up for. In fact, which reminds me, if I may tell you about career management in the old days you never did the job you were posted in to do, because by the time you had arrived, it's changed already.
So I'm not accepting that nowadays. It just doesn't work if we're going to use this modernised process that every company out there in real life uses, where they can see what the job is that they're applying for. What's it do?
And that will be transparent, that review?
If you look now, and I should have brought my laptop with me and opened up Skill, because of course it all works now on your laptop. I just want it to work on the phone. But right now, I can click on, using Skill on my military laptop, I can click on every JPAN and see now what the job spec is. See now the competencies associated with that post. But most of my Air Force doesn't have the laptop in front of them all the time, all day. They're in hangars. They're in the King's Colour Squadron when I was briefing at RAF Northolt last week. They're out and about doing stuff. They're on above secret. So they can't rely on this system all the time. So getting onto the phones, getting onto the bring your own device, to use the modern terminology, is our answer.
So they will be able to read a review of a colleague and see what their colleague says, and if it's good for my, I came out of that job on promotion.
Not quite that far. What we have to do at this stage, but I do like what you're saying, actually. I think I might do that in the future. At this stage, what they can view on their screen, currently on their laptop, soon to be on their phone, they can view the job specs of that, the job specification. What's it trying to do? They can view the competence associated with it. But that peer group review of a job is not a bad idea. Because other systems have that already. If you think of glass ceiling... And,
absolutely, yeah. Well, you heard it here first on Inside Air.
Peter, I'll give you that one. That's a very good idea. So I'll make a little note of that. I can't promise that in the short term. But in the longer term, why not? It probably exists already, doesn't it? We're just not monitoring it. There already are going to be
it's
subcultures.
Since 1918, probably.
Well, yeah. So
Don't volunteer for that job.
No, never volunteer for the guardroom. And yeah, so I will investigate my staff how quickly we could come up with something along those lines. In the shorter term, though, it's more focused on the official channels anyway. It's more focused on seeing the job spec, seeing what that role actually is about, seeing the command chain, understanding what you're applying for as part of this transparency and fairness in our approach.
Do you think it will make any difference to the speed in which an aviator is promoted?
So, the speed of promotion depends on many things. We spoke earlier of our outflow reaching a historically unseen level of 10%, 10.5%. That will change promotion flows. So promotion flows are dependent on how many slots we have. We only promote not on the capability of individual on itself. It's not enough to be the best aviator in NATO. If there's no slot for you to go into, then we can't promote you. We don't promote and just say, stay where you are, congratulations. Every promotion comes with the new posting at the new rank. So it's not done on just quality alone. There must be available slots to go to. So there is an advantage to some of our outflow increasing, because if you're in a dead man's shoes moment, when the warrant officer goes, someone's going to be promoted to be warrant officer, which means someone else is going to be promoted to flight sergeant. And it trickles down our system. But that also has a drawback of we need to increase input into the service, we need to train more people. So already we have the slowest promotion flows of the three services, because our enlisted aviators serve much longer than they do in the Royal Navy or in the British Army. So it's a dismotivator, if you like, or a demotivator. But on the other hand, for the organisation's benefit, it means we have to recruit less new people into the service, we have to train less. So there's a trade-off that happens there all the time, both the needs of the individual and the needs of the service.
What one piece of advice do you have for aviators when they download this or they see this pop up on my RAF app?
So when they see it either on their app or right now on their military laptops, they can log on to Skier. And this is the vital thing.
Do they need new usernames and passwords?
You use your same username and password that you use for ModNet.
So there's no resistance? No,
it's not. It's a 2-second exercise. Right now you can find the Skier login portal either on the RAF intranet page or on my own career management page, and you can go straight in today. And that's not just useful for them in their future, it's useful right now. You may remember we were speaking about program professions earlier. I talked about the first 5 had graduated because there's no change of employment expectation. I moved on to INT being the first of the complex ones. Complex ones have the offer to transfer. We promised under program professions that we wouldn't force this on people. We were offering them instead a new future, brighter, more agile, more flexible, more choice. And we argued that they'd choose to come with us under an options transfer. Now, in the old days, to do an options transfer for even the 1,040 in the int profession we issued out last month, to do that would have required clerks and paperwork and sending envelopes and getting it back. But nowadays, we did that under skier. So every int profession aviator, enlisted aviator, was given their offer to transfer to professions on skier. You've got to be on skier to get it. There is no other mechanism. As a consequence of this modernised CM process, I knew that the first int enlisted aviator took 3.5 minutes from when the machine had sent that aviator the offer to transfer to opening it, accepting it and sending it back. Because I could track everything. In the good old days, we'd be employing thousands of clerks to do that. Now, I said the 1,040 in the int profession. There's 25,000 in the other professions that have to be given that offer. So log on to Skio. Use your military laptop now, but by the summer, it'll be on the My RAF system, on their mobile phone.
There we go. Air Commodore Britain, thank you for being on Inside Air again. No doubt we'll have a chat in a year's time or so and see
how it goes. We'll have the next thing for you then, Peter. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
This is Reheat for Inside Air. I'm AS1 Victoria Andrews. RAF Typhoons currently deployed to Estonia and Cyprus, 617 Squadron F-35B Lightnings and a Bryce Norton-based Voyager have joined 250 aircraft from 25 nations to take part in NATO's largest air deployment exercise, Germany's Exercise Air Defender. The main aim of the exercise is to test the alliance's collective aerial response to an attack on a member state. Participants will also undergo realistic live firing opportunities, which are designed to improve interoperability and cooperation. Meanwhile, senior NATO commanders have visited RAF Bulmer to see the UK's new Guardian system in action. The system gives RAF personnel based in the Control Reporting Centre a real-time picture of friendly and hostile aircraft. The Air Command and Control system also connects UK and NATO radars to ensure the sharing of information across borders and seamless collaboration with allied aircraft in the skies. The same Guardian capability was put to the test when the Royal Air Force was asked to monitor Russian naval ships exercising close to UK territorial waters. Typhoons and a PA Poseidon from RAF Lossiemouth worked in coordination with the Royal Navy Type 45 destroyer, HMS Defender, to monitor the vessels. Elsewhere, Typhoons have been scrambled to intercept Russian aircraft flying over the Baltic Sea. The Russian aircraft were not complying with international norms by failing to communicate with the relevant flight information regions. However, they did remain in international airspace and flew in a professional manner. 140 Expeditionary Air Wing are currently deployed to Estonia to undertake NATO's Baltic air policing mission. And finally, a national flag-raising ceremony took place in Cornwall to mark the start of Armed Forces Week. Over 150 events took place over the course of the week in towns and cities across the country to show support for serving personnel, reservists, veterans, cadets and the families that support them. Now in its 15th year, this year's National Armed Forces Day took place on Saturday, 24th of June. That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of 3 C-130J Hercules performing a farewell flypast across the UK. On Wednesday the 14th of June, people looked to the skies as 3 C-130J Hercules completed a salute to the nation with a flypast over RAF stations and places of significance to the aircraft's history. The flypast marked the forthcoming retirement of the aircraft, departing from RAF Bryce Norton at 1000 hours and making an appearance over 21 key locations before returning 7 hours later. Some of these sites included the National Memorial Arboretum, RAF College Cranwell, Salisbury Plain and a special Typhoon escort over RAF Lossiemouth. The C-130J Hercules officially retires from RAF service on the 30th of June 2023.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review, subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.